At the hotel, nobody understood the millionaire Japanese woman. Till the black maid spoke Japanese. The Regent Grand Hotel in Midtown was not just a place to sleep, it was a fortress of corporate power. Every marble floor and velvet drape whispered the price of luxury. The most critical guest in the hotel that week was Mrs. Akari Kaito, the lead representative for the Miyazaki Group, a Japanese conglomerate poised to finalize a multi-billion-dollar acquisition of the Regent Grand's parent company. The entire future of the hotel chain rested on her satisfaction. But Mrs. Kaito was not satisfied. The conflict was playing out in the hotel's most exclusive executive lounge. Mrs. Kaito, impeccably dressed but visibly furious, was speaking in rapid, formal Japanese, her voice tight with frustration. Across the table, sweating profusely, was Mr. Julian Thorne, the senior concierge and self-proclaimed master of guest relations. "I apologize, Mrs. Kaito," Thorne stammered, holding up his smartphone. "We are having some trouble with the interpretation. My translation software seems to be having a network issue." Thorne was a man who believed arrogance was a substitute for competence. He had dismissed the hotel staff interpreter hours ago, claiming her slow, bookish Japanese was unnecessary when he had a cutting-edge AI in his pocket. Mrs. Kaito's voice rose, the pitch suggesting not just anger, but profound insult. She gestured sharply toward a contract document on the table, then to her teacup. Thorne frantically typed a phrase into his app. "What is the issue with your tea, madam?" The app spat out, "Your drink is weak, and the failure of the third party will be a great shame to the ancestors." Thorne smiled weakly. "Ah, the tea is weak. I will have the entire tea service replaced immediately. Our apologies for the lack of strength, ma'am." Mrs. Kaito slammed her hand on the table, her composure finally shattering. She launched into a blistering diatribe, ending with a phrase that sounded final and terrible. She grabbed her leather briefcase and began moving toward the door. Thorne looked at the Japanese negotiating team, who all averted their eyes in embarrassed silence. "Gentlemen, please. Tell her we will fix the tea. The general manager will bring her the strongest espresso known to man." The Japanese team leader shook his head sadly and spoke in broken English. "Too late. She says great insult. Deal, maybe finished." The panic in Thorne's eyes was now raw. Losing the Kaito deal would cost him his career, and the hotel its existence. Just outside the lounge, polishing the brass handle of a service elevator, was Naomi Jackson. Naomi was one of the hotel's diligent, reliable housekeepers. She wore the standard uniform, dark pants and a quiet, professional tunic. To the elite guests and the arrogant management, she was just another part of the immaculate background. Naomi had been listening. She hadn't been eavesdropping, she had simply been working. Her head was down, but her mind was wide awake, and she understood every single word. Naomi wasn't just a maid. She had spent 10 years of her childhood living in Kyoto with her diplomat father. She had studied Japanese literature at university before family obligations forced her to take the first stable job she could find. Her Japanese was fluent, formal, and rich with cultural nuance. She heard Mrs. Kaito's final, angry declaration and knew exactly what was wrong. It wasn't the tea. It was a crisis of respect and business structure. As Mrs. Kaito reached the executive lounge door, Naomi knew she had seconds before the deal walked out. She dropped her polishing cloth, straightened her uniform, and stepped directly into the path of the billionaire. Mr. Thorne let out a strangled cry. "Jackson! Get back! You don't approach guests." Naomi ignored him. She looked Mrs. Kaito directly in the eye and spoke. Her voice was calm, clear, and perfectly articulated, using the respectful, formal language reserved for the highest levels of Japanese corporate hierarchy. "Kaito-sama, go maiwaku o okakshite mashiwake gozaimasen. Oyakusoku no kai koshitsu kozai jie shihan kozo enai fusuku de aruta no go shitiki de yoroshiai disaka." The effect was instantaneous and profound. Mrs. Kaito stopped dead. Her furious expression melted into pure, absolute shock. She stared at Naomi, at the black woman in the hotel maid's uniform, as if she were a ghost from a past life. She replied in the same formal Japanese, her tone now respectful and urgent. "You understood?" "Yes. The room configuration is not the problem. The contract stated the capital structure was too heavily focused on third-party reliance, and the lack of a proper, direct liaison here confirms my fears. It is an insult to the sanctity of the agreement. Naomi nodded, maintaining eye contact. I understand completely, Kaito-sama. The structural risk and the cultural expectation of a reliable, direct internal contact. Mr. Thorne's reliance on the application was interpreted as a lack of serious commitment. Thorne stood paralyzed, watching the two women exchange rapid, complex dialogue that sounded like a perfectly executed theatrical performance. He was utterly excluded from the conversation that determined his hotel's fate. Naomi turned, just her head, and addressed Thorne in cool, professional English. Mr. Thorne, Mrs. Kaito is not upset about the tea. She is upset because the contract stipulated that the current room, the Imperial Suite, must have an immediate, dedicated internal security line, demonstrating the hotel's full commitment to the Miyazaki Group's physical presence here. The failure to provide a proper, direct line of contact and your subsequent dismissal of her concerns via a machine was interpreted as an intentional demonstration that this acquisition lacks the foundational respect necessary for Japanese business relations. She believes the deal is fatally flawed. Thorne's face went from pale to sickly green. He had nearly derailed a multi-billion-dollar deal because he thought the most powerful woman in the room was complaining about Earl Grey. Mrs. Kaito stepped forward, her hand finding Naomi's arm. Your Japanese is flawless. Your understanding of Kigo and Tateme is impeccable. You are the only person in this entire establishment who grasped the meaning behind my words. She pulled out her personal satellite phone and made a single, terse call. She spoke directly to the CEO of the Regent Grand's parent company, bypassing all management. The deal is not dead, but it will only proceed under one condition: Naomi Jackson must be immediately appointed as the executive cultural strategist and personal liaison for the Miyazaki Group for the duration of the transition. She will be the sole point of contact for all future negotiations. Her expertise and respect saved this deal. You have 1 hour to make this official. Mrs. Kaito returned her phone to her ear, gave Naomi a small, respectful bow, and then calmly walked back into the executive lounge. Mr. Julian Thorne stood slack-jawed, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. A man in a crisp suit, the general manager of the Regent Grand, came sprinting up the hall, phone still plastered to his ear. He looked from Thorne to Naomi, then back to the closed lounge door. Jackson, the manager gasped, seizing her hands. You just saved the company. What is your background? Why didn't we know this? Naomi simply smiled, picking up her polishing cloth and tucking it into her belt. You never asked, sir. You never asked anyone who was busy working. By the end of the day, Mr. Julian Thorne was reassigned to the night laundry desk. Naomi Jackson, the woman who had started her shift cleaning door handles, finished it with a private, signed contract, a $250,000 salary, and the profound respect of a billionaire client. She changed out of her uniform for the last time, leaving the Regent Grand not as an invisible background worker, but as the most critical executive in the building. The power of hidden talent had finally eclipsed the arrogance of assumed authority.